Today gave my youngest son advice on happy relationships, and my oldest son's girlfriend dumped him. First, some clarification. My oldest son is now a young adult and no longer lives under our roof. He came over recently, just long enough to drop off a birthday gift for my youngest son, share a slice of cake with us, and then leave with his girlfriend. My daughter and my youngest son are still teenagers living at home. My daughter and my oldest son's now ex-girlfriend met through him years ago, but even after their breakup, they've managed to remain friends. Now for the update. After the breakup between my son and his girlfriend, and after he yelled at me in frustration, a lot was said, and even more was revealed. Secrets I hadn't known about came to light. I decided to give my son a couple of days to cool off before trying to reach out to him. My wife made a few attempts to call, but he ignored them. So I drove over to his apartment, and thanks to his roommate convincing him, I was allowed in. What followed was a tough but honest conversation. There was shouting, some heated words, and in the end, a hug that said more than either of us could manage. It was then that I learned something I hadn't known. My son had received a job offer out of state. It's part of an apprenticeship program through his trade school. The offer came with nearly double his current hourly wage and even covered part of his tuition for future classes. But with that opportunity came tension. His girlfriend wanted him to stay nearby with her family, while he wanted her to make the move with him. They were both pulling in opposite directions, and neither could compromise. Some commenters pointed out that my son seemed to have a misogynistic streak, and initially I dismissed that. But after talking with him, I realized that maybe, just maybe, he had picked up some distorted ideas from watching my marriage. Not because of what we intended to show him, but because of what he observed without understanding the context. One particular example he brought up was something my wife and I have always joked about: the magic coffee cup. Ever since we started dating, my wife has insisted on making my coffee. It was never something I demanded. It simply became one of our quirks, one of those small, loving rituals. Over the years, it turned into a running joke. Whenever I finished a cup, my wife would pick it up, wave her hands over it, and say things like "hocus pocus" or "bibbity bobbity boo" before disappearing into the kitchen to brew a fresh pot. Sometimes, I'd play along by shaking the empty cup, peeking inside and whining, "Honey, my magic cup isn't working again." She'd roll her eyes, hip-check me out of the way if I even tried to make my own coffee, and take over. It's our playful dance, one that, after decades together, still makes us both smile. But my son only saw the surface of that interaction. He didn't see the years of love, compromise, and partnership that built it. He didn't see that when she's sick or tired, I'm the one making coffee for her without hesitation. That when it comes to cooking, cleaning, or taking care of the house, we both pick up where the other leaves off. What he mistook for rigid gender roles is really a love language we crafted through years of shared life. I explained all of this to him, hoping he'd understand. But I could see the conflict in his eyes. Part of him wanted to believe it, but another part had already internalized the harsh rhetoric he'd been consuming elsewhere. And that was just the beginning. My son may think the little rituals between my wife and me are outdated or misogynistic, but that couldn't be further from the truth. Our relationship is built on decades of playful habits and unspoken understanding, things that only make sense when you've lived side by side for years, weathering storms and celebrating victories together. Take the so-called magic coffee cup, for example. To him, it might look like outdated tradition. But for us, it's a small act of love. My wife insists on making my coffee because, in her words, "It's the first way I ever spoiled you, and I'm not about to stop now." And I let her, because I know how much joy it brings her. Every morning, when she picks up that empty cup, she puts on a show. She waves her hands, chants nonsense spells like alakazam or bibbity bobbity brew, and grins like she's just performed actual magic. And I play along, peeking into the cup, shaking it as if something might miraculously appear and whining, "Honey, I think the magic's broken." We laugh, and it's one of those little moments that stitch a marriage together. But that's not the whole story. What my son doesn't see is that when she's having a rough day, I sneak into the kitchen and make her tea exactly the way she likes, just the right amount of honey and a cinnamon stick, or that I cook her favorite dinner on her birthday, and pretend I've forgotten how to make it, so she has an excuse to brag about me later. We have a running joke. I do the laundry, she does the dishes, and we both pretend the other one is utterly helpless at the other task. In reality, she knows how to run a washer just fine and I can load a dishwasher like a pro, but we keep up the charade because it makes us laugh. I've told her a dozen times that if she ever leaves me, I'd be stuck in wrinkled shirts with no clue how to fold fitted sheets. She jokes that if I ever left, the dishes would stage a revolt and take over the kitchen. These little quirks didn't appear overnight. They came from years of compromise and trial and error. And what looks to my son like rigid gender roles are actually flexible, living agreements that we renegotiate without even speaking. He saw the product of years of effort and mistook it for old-fashioned thinking. While I was having that heart-to-heart with him, my wife and daughter were talking with his ex-girlfriend. They found out things I hadn't known. My son has been listening to podcasts and influencers who preach outdated, harmful views on relationships. He's been internalizing the idea that women should handle most of the housework and that men lead while women follow. I was stunned. That's not the household he grew up in. Sure, we joke about chores and have our routines, but at the end of the day, we're a team. He thought dishes were harder than laundry. Maybe they are. But laundry isn't just throwing clothes into a machine. It's rotating towels, changing sheets, shaking out curtains, and making sure everyone in the house has fresh linens without even having to ask. I've done it for years, not because it's my job, but because that's what partnership is. You do what needs to be done, and you do it with love. I told my son that therapy might help him unpack these misguided beliefs, but I doubt he'll go. He's young, full of certainty, and hasn't yet learned that being sure of yourself doesn't mean you're always right. Sometimes the hardest thing in life is realizing you've been wrong about something important. Patrick, if you ever read this, I love you. But buddy, you need to pull your head out of your ass and start seeing the world and relationships for what they really are. This story perfectly shows how easily people, even the closest ones, can misunderstand each other. Sometimes we see only the external result, the finished picture of a relationship, and we don't realize how many years of work, compromises, and small traditions are behind it. The son perceived what for the parents was a game and an expression of love as something toxic, simply because he didn't know all the details and started absorbing other people's wrong attitudes from social media. It's important to remember, no marriage is built on a template. Each union is unique and is made up of little things that only two people understand. And one more thing, critical thinking is always needed, especially when we begin to form our opinions under the influence of other people's words, rather than our own observations. Today I messed up by trying to help my cat after he got a bag caught around his neck. This all unfolded just yesterday, and today I'm still dealing with the aftermath, both emotional and physical. It was around 5 p.m., the time of day when my cat, Leo, M9, turns into a furry missile powered by pure chaos. His evening zoomies had begun in full force. I had carelessly left a reusable cooler bag on the floor, and Leo had made it his personal playground. He was diving in, disappearing into the bag, and then bursting out with dramatic flair, pouncing on random toys or just tearing through the room like a lunatic. After a few rounds of this routine, I watched the inevitable happen in what felt like slow motion. Leo shoved his head through one of the bag's carry handles, twisting just enough for the loop to tighten around his neck. The second he bolted out of the bag, the entire cooler came with him. My heart stopped. I lunged off the couch, but I was already too late. For the next 5 minutes, my living room turned into a scene straight out of an action movie gone wrong. Leo was rocketing in pure terror, under tables, around the coffee table, behind the computer desk, squeezing into every nook and cranny that used to be his safe place. But now, wherever he went, the bag went too. It flapped loudly behind him, chasing him like some monstrous predator he couldn't escape. He crashed into walls, knocked over chairs, and sent books and cables flying. I could hear the painful thuds, and each one made me wince, imagining the bruises and sore muscles he was collecting along the way. And here's where I really messed up. Instead of sitting still and letting him calm down, I instinctively tried to help, but I did it all wrong. I ended up chasing after him, not aggressively, but just enough to keep fueling his panic. Eventually, I managed to herd him into the bedroom. He shot under the bed like a furry missile fired into a bunker. I quickly closed the bedroom door to keep him contained and pulled the mattress back from the wall. My plan was to climb up and reach down between the bed slats, gently unhook the handle from his neck. But in my panic, I hadn't considered one key thing. I was invading his last safe hiding spot while he was in full-blown fight-or-flight mode. And here's where I made my second big mistake. I didn't stop to think. I just acted. Looming over Leo, reaching into his most sacred dark hiding spot while he was in full panic mode, was about the worst thing I could have done. By the time I finally reached down through the slats of the bed to grab the bag handle, Leo had already managed to free himself. The loop was gone from his neck, but his terror hadn't left. As soon as my hand got near him, he erupted into growls, hisses, and spitting fury. And then came the howling. Ear-piercing, primal howling that shook the room. I quickly grabbed the offending bag and backed off the bed, putting everything back in place while from underneath, Leo kept screaming and hissing like he was facing off against a mortal enemy. My house has one of those concertina sliding doors that separate the front living area from the bedrooms. Normally, when Leo is hyper or acting out, I'll just close that door, give him space, and wait for him to calm down. It's always worked before. But this time was different. He didn't calm down. For the next few hours, every time I so much as peeked in, or even walked down the hall to use the bathroom, I'd hear him instantly go into full territorial mode, yowling, hissing, and screaming as if I was a threat encroaching on his territory. I knew exactly what this was. Cats are weird, wonderful, dumb creatures, and one of their most ridiculous traits is redirected aggression. When something freaks them out and they can't fight that thing directly, they'll store up that aggression and take it out on whatever poor soul crosses their path later. In Leo's case, that unfortunate soul is always me. Usually it's minor. He might see a bird through the window in the morning, get frustrated, and then bite my ankle when I get home from work that evening. But this was something else entirely. I'd only seen him this furious and terrified twice before. Once when an ex-girlfriend overstayed her welcome and startled him, and another time when I, in my infinite wisdom, tried to introduce a second cat as a companion. He hated that idea with a passion and made it crystal clear. As bedtime approached, I cracked the concertina door open just slightly, hoping that maybe he'd come out on his own terms and settle near me. Miraculously, that worked. After some cautious creeping and suspicious glances, Leo slowly made his way into the living room and eventually jumped onto my lap. I put on YouTube, sipped some hot cocoa and gave him gentle head pats. For a brief moment, all seemed well. I finally went to bed around midnight, and as usual, Leo darted off the moment I stood up from the couch. But, true to form, he crept back in a few minutes later and curled up beside me, purring softly. For a brief moment, I thought the chaos was over. At around 2 a.m., I woke up to the unmistakable sound of him coughing and sputtering, building up to that dreaded pre-vomit retch. On autopilot, I scooped him up and gently set him down on the hallway tiles, the designated safe zone for any cat bath emergencies. But he didn't throw up. Instead, he shot me a dirty look as if I'd just insulted his ancestors, then bolted into the front of the house. Since I was already up, my bladder and prostate decided to join the party, singing their own miserable duet. So I shuffled to the bathroom and sat there scrolling Reddit, waiting for my body to cooperate. After 10 minutes and an embarrassingly small result, I flushed and stepped into the hallway, and there he was, Leo, waiting for me. His fur was bristled, ears pinned back, eyes wide and wild. He let out an ear-splitting scream and hissed, crouching low like a predator about to pounce. My instinct was to wave my foot in the air to shoo him away, a trick that usually worked. Not this time. He only got louder and angrier. We had a standoff. Every time I tried to move past him, he screamed louder, daring me to make a move. Finally, I managed to back him up toward the bedroom doorway, just enough to slip past and make it to the kitchen, but he wasn't done with me yet. While I fumbled for some melatonin to salvage what was left of the night, Leo followed, corralling me into the kitchen with relentless hissing and screeching. Desperate, I nudged an empty Uber Eats bag toward him with my foot, and, thank the cat gods, He retreated back to the bedroom, disappearing under the bed again. But instead of hiding in the far corner like he usually did, he hovered near the edge of the bed frame, ready to lunge at me if I so much as peeked into the room. I closed the concertina door once more, but I was running out of options. I needed to sleep, and I had an early start the next day. I gave it another 10 minutes, then tried cracking the door open slightly. Just like before, he eventually slinked out and joined me on the couch. We sat quietly. I gave him cautious head scratches and all seemed well, until I stood up. Instantly, he jumped in front of me, blocking my path, hissing and growling like I was a burglar in my own home. He glared at me from the center console of the recliner, daring me to make one wrong move. I briefly considered just sleeping on the couch, but with sleep apnea that wasn't an option. Out of sheer desperation, I resorted to the nuclear option, the sin bin, the laundry room, his personal timeout zone. I'd used it before with minor drama, a few scratches, maybe a bite. But this time was different. I waited until he was loafed up, facing away from me. Then I moved, scooped him up with one hand under his belly and the other supporting his scruff. But the moment I lifted him, he twisted like a demon, going full berserk. He clawed and bit with a fury I'd never seen. I managed to hold on, took a few scratches, and tossed him gently but firmly into the laundry room, shutting the door behind him. Only then did I notice the warmth trickling down the side of my face. He had caught me, hard, on the side of my head. My ear was bleeding, badly. As I grabbed him from behind, one hand supporting his belly, pressing him gently against my body, the other gripping the scruff of his neck, Leo transformed from a panicked cat into an unhinged demon. His legs latched onto my arm like furry grappling hooks, claws digging in deep. He twisted with impossible force, contorting mid-air, and before I could even react, he landed a savage swipe across the side of my head. I somehow managed to wrestle him into the laundry room, shutting the door with a trembling hand. My heart was pounding, adrenaline rushing, and then I felt it. Warm blood running down the side of my neck. I hurried to the bathroom mirror, grabbed the first aid kit and tried to assess the damage. My ear was split, not just scratched. It had a deep notch carved into it, like someone had ripped out a small hoop earring. Blood was dripping steadily, but thankfully it slowed after a few minutes. I cleaned the wound with antiseptic and clumsily tried to attach a band-aid to the awkward curve of my ear, which was about as effective as trying to tape paper to a moving fan. I finally got it to stick and went to bed, hoping, praying, that after a few hours of isolation, Leo would calm down. Spoiler alert, he did not. Morning came, and the second I opened the laundry door, Leo greeted me not with purrs or forgiveness, but with more screaming and hissing. He blocked the hallway like a tiny orange bouncer on a mission. Desperate for peace and basic mobility, I grabbed my cricket bat, my home defense cane, and used it like a guide stick, slowly shuffling forward while he slapped the hell out of it. He'd unleash a flurry of furious swats, then retreat just enough for me to pass. This bizarre, slow-motion cat duel became my new reality. I had errands to run, so I left him barricaded and darted out. After my first appointment, I returned home to what felt like a fragile ceasefire. He greeted me at the door, tail up, running ahead as if all was forgiven. But halfway down the hall, he stopped dead, turned, and the demonic screaming resumed. I knew I needed professional reinforcements. I consulted online forums and friends, the collective Brains Trust, for advice on calming down a fur-covered PTSD grenade. At last, around 3 p.m., I stopped by a specialist pet store. I loaded up on supplies, a Feliway diffuser to pump calming pheromones into the air, a catnip toy to distract him, calming sprays for his favorite hideouts, and calming snacks that might as well have been kitty Valium. When I got home, Leo was still a ball of furious orange energy. I held the cricket bat in front of me like a medieval shield as I tiptoed into the kitchen. He hissed and followed me around the house, yelling at me with every step as I unpacked the supplies. I plugged in the diffuser, sprayed the couch and his favorite nap spots, and cracked open the calming snack paste. Slowly, cautiously, I shuffled over to my desk with cricket bat in tow and got to work. Eventually, Leo crept out from behind the furniture, suspicious but curious. I extended a careful hand letting him sniff. He gave me a tentative head bump. I exhaled. Progress. I rewarded him with pats and a taste of the calming paste. For the first time in 24 hours, I felt a glimmer of hope. By this point, I had finally cracked the code. If I was seated, whether on the couch or at my desk, I was safe. In that position, I was the comforting human he knew and loved. But the moment I stood up and moved around, I apparently morphed into some towering threat. That's when Leo would switch into full fight or flight mode, and the cricket bat became my makeshift shield and negotiation tool. According to advice from my brain's trust of cat owners and behaviorists, this kind of post-traumatic aggression would, in theory, fade over the next few days as Leo's trust in me slowly rebuilt. But that didn't make living through it any easier. Then came the day's final test. I had an electrician scheduled to come by around 4 p.m. to check some faulty wiring. When the tradie knocked on the door, Leo, my fierce orange terror, instantly vanished, darting behind the TV cabinet without a single sound. I stepped outside with the electrician to warn him. Just a heads up, when we go inside, my cat might scream at me like a banshee while I wave around a cricket bat. Don't worry, he's not after you, just me. But nothing. Leo remained silent and hidden the entire time the electrician was in the house. Not a hiss, not a growl. It became crystal clear. This wasn't general aggression. This was deeply personal. He only had this primal, irrational fear towards me, the very person who'd been trying to help him. After the electrician left, Leo crept back out and resumed the bizarre routine we'd developed. Gentle affection if I was sitting, followed by furious screeches and pouncing attempts if I dared to stand or move. Even going to the bathroom felt like sneaking through enemy territory. The day wrapped up with a small silver lining. I got a text from the pharmacy around 6 p.m. telling me my happy pills, antidepressants, were ready for pickup. While waiting there, only to be told they actually weren't ready yet, I once again consulted the online cat behavior experts. With all the details laid out, Leo only trusting seated me and perceiving standing me as some walking nightmare, someone suggested a brilliantly simple idea: make myself small, crawl or crab walk around the house. Desperate, I decided to try it. When I got home, I knelt down right inside the doorway. The second Leo's posturing started, he froze, then instantly relaxed. I shuffled forward on my knees like a medieval squire, pausing occasionally to stretch out my hand for him to sniff and give me that wary little head bump. It worked. It absolutely worked. Sure, it felt ridiculous, and my knees were screaming by the time I made it to the kitchen, but for the first time in nearly 2 days, I could move around my own home without being ambushed by a tiny orange ball of rage. Sometimes we forget that even the simplest and kindest of intentions can turn into stress and fear for animals. This story is a reminder of how important it is to stay calm and give your pet space when they are scared. Panicking and chaotic attempts to help can only make the situation worse. Every animal has its own limits of trust and reaction to stress, and sometimes it's best to wait, give it time, and proceed very carefully. Hopefully, both owner and cat will eventually regain trust in each other. I messed up by exposing my co-worker for cheating on his fiancée with my friend. It happened a little over a month ago. Even though things have calmed down at work and I recognize that I made a mistake, there is still a feeling inside that the situation is not completely resolved. I have been working with my co-worker, let's call her Ella, age 25, since 2023. We've always had a good relationship, but really bonded when we started working together in the same classroom. About 6 months ago, we had a new member of staff at our school, Sam, age 27. He was great with the kids, charismatic and personable. I had heard that he was engaged, but I didn't think much of it. A few months later, at a work cocktail party, another co-worker, watching Ella and Sam standing side by side, remarked, "They look so good together. It's like the perfect couple." Surprised, I asked, "Doesn't Sam have a fiancée?" But my colleague confidently replied that it wasn't true. Later, I heard another co-worker talking about Sam again. She too stated that she had never heard of his engagement. After a couple of weeks, Ella and I began to talk about more than just work. I learned more about her life than I ever had before. Her story was full of tragedy, and the more I listened to her, the more I admired her fortitude. However, it became obvious to me that she suffered from severe anxiety, and for good reason. All of our co-workers knew that we were rooting for Ella and Sam's couple. After winter break, Ella unexpectedly confessed to me that she and Sam had been secretly texting and meeting before work for 3 months. She was worried that the school might find out about it. I had no idea that their relationship had gone that far, but I assured her that nothing looked suspicious and that our management was unlikely to crack down hard on such liaisons. But Ella continued to be nervous. She told me that Sam was afraid of the possible consequences, so she didn't want to force things. This made her feel tired, depressed, and tense. At one point, she said she was going to end things with him once and for all. I don't think I should continue. If he loses his job because of this, I just won't be able to forgive myself. I tried to be supportive and suggested she look into her real motives. Maybe it's just fear. Are you sure you don't have regrets? Ella nodded. She was determined to end this relationship. But soon, when I asked if she had succeeded in breaking up with him, she only grinned. He wouldn't let me do it. Doubts and disturbing rumors. Shortly afterward, one of our co-workers called me in a panic. She had spoken to another co-worker, a man who works for us, along with his wife. The conversation turned to the policy against office romances, and this co-worker, realizing where the conversation was going, asked a direct question herself. Does this have anything to do with Sam and Ella? My colleague cautiously replied, what if it does? And then he seriously stated that he knew for sure Sam was engaged. Moreover, he had personally spoken to him about it. Now we were faced with a dilemma. Should I tell Ella the truth? I thought she should know, but the other 2 colleagues were against it. They decided not to tell directly, but just to advise Ella to keep her distance because of possible problems at work. But I didn't like this lie to save my life at all. I didn't like this decision, but no matter how much I tried to convince my colleagues to do otherwise, they stood their ground. In the end, I accepted it and decided not to say anything to Ella. But the very next day, during the weekend, Ella texted me excitedly. She'd asked Sam out on a date and it had gone great. I tried to feign joy, but everything inside me was turning upside down. It was so fake that I just couldn't take it anymore and said, I don't want to say anything, but you should be careful in this relationship. My words immediately sparked a flurry of questions. Wait, what? Why did you say that? Did something happen? I tried to dodge, but she kept pushing. I'm freaking out. Please tell me I'm just winding myself up and it's okay. Finally, I couldn't take it anymore and told her that we had suspicions but no proof yet. She turned pale. If it's true, I'll never be able to show my face at work again. She said she would talk to Sam immediately. I felt the ground go from under my feet. I texted my co-worker, confessing that I had blabbed. All I got in response was a sigh and a shrug. I felt really lousy. I had broken my word, and more importantly, I had put Ella in a stressful situation, even though she had enough problems as it was. Later, she wrote again, I talked to Sam. No, he's not married. This alarmed me, but I held back and replied, good for you. On Monday, however, I received an urgent text from a co-worker. I have news. Need to discuss in person. When we met, she showed me the photos. Sam's wedding registry, with the wedding set for April. A photo of him holding a for sale sign next to a girl, obviously his fiancée. I was seething with anger. How could he? I hate the lies, the betrayal, the foul play. The very fact that he was leading not only his fiancée around by the nose, but Ella as well, infuriated me. The co-workers started up again. Let's just stay out of it. It's none of our business. But I didn't see it that way. Ella deserved to know the truth. They were afraid of upsetting her, afraid she'd find out we'd been digging for information about Sam. I didn't agree with that, of course, but I still gave in. After the last time my words had sent her into a panic attack, I was afraid of hurting her again. And then Sam came to work. When he walked into our classroom, my blood nearly boiled. I wanted to just stand up and tell him to his face, but I held back. But fate had it differently. When I came out of the restroom, I saw him in the hallway, talking to his student, a new employee he was training. I didn't even think twice, I just headed over to him. Hey Sam, can I talk to you for a minute? He turned to me, his apprentice staying behind. The thought flashed through my mind. Should I say this in private? But I'd already gone too far. I took a step forward, looking straight into Sam's eyes. You know Cass? He frowned. Who? Cass. Cass. Yeah, I know her. Is she your fiancée? What? She's your fiancée? He froze for a moment. Yeah. How did you... I found your wedding registry. You're getting married in April, right? Sam grinned awkwardly, as if trying to get control of the situation. Oh, yeah. Congratulations. Thanks. I paused, not averting my gaze. Does Ella know? Instantly, his expression changed. The smile disappeared, tension flashed in his eyes. He froze, sizing me up, as if deciding what to say next. 3 seconds of silence. No. She has to know. Another moment of silence. Then he spoke, still making eye contact. We need to talk. We're already talking. No. Ella and I need to talk. I nodded, holding his gaze. That's a good idea. Thanks for telling me. No problem. I turned around and walked slowly back to the classroom. Behind Sam's back, his intern stood in complete silence, hesitant to intervene. My hands were shaking, my heart pounding so hard it felt like it could be heard in the empty hallway. I'd just burned a bridge, and all I had to do was wait for the consequences. I walked back to class feeling completely out of it. My head isn't thinking straight, and my chest feels heavy, like I can't even realize what I've just done. I look back at coworker number 2, and she, catching the look on my face, realizes something has happened. I just shake my head. Later I confess that I talked to Sam, and she literally explodes with emotion, laughing, cheering, excitedly gibbering. Her reaction relaxes me a bit, and when I tell everything to my other coworker, they both start cheering me on. You're my hero, you did a great job. But an hour later, Ella comes up to me, clearly nervous. Did you talk to Sam? I freeze, then notice coworker number 2 behind her. She looks grim. Yeah. Ella gasps, horror in her eyes. What did you say? I try to avoid answering, telling her that she'd be better off hearing everything directly from him. She continues to insist, until I, feeling searing shame, admit that I mentioned her name. She abruptly turns around and walks away. All day I feel a heavy lump inside, as if I've been crushed by a pall of guilt. After work, I walk up to her and apologize. I'm not mad at you, she replies. I just wish you hadn't said my name. I continue to apologize, feeling like a complete idiot, but she no longer responds. Later, coworker number 2 texts back, Are you okay? I confess that I feel stressed and stupid for messing up. She leaves me to my reading. All night I can't get it out of my head. I discuss the situation with my family and best friend. They say I had good intentions, but it was wrong to interfere, and I shouldn't let it torment me like this. I don't sleep. It's not until 6 in the morning that I manage to regain a little bit of consciousness. At that moment I realize, if I were in Ella's shoes, I would want a friend to do the same thing. Yes, maybe I made a mistake. Yes, if time could have been turned back, I wouldn't have said so. But I acted according to my moral principles. That thought helps me find some stability. Late at night, in a fit of anxiety, I text coworker number 1 about how bad I feel. In the morning, she suggests we call. I agree, feeling a little calmer. But when we talk, she spends 20 minutes talking about her life, how she once messed up a relationship with a friend, how she agonized over it, but then learned an important lesson. After 10 minutes of conversation, it strikes me that she never once asks how I'm feeling. She didn't even mention that she herself was involved in the whole thing. She just used the situation to once again spell out her own conclusions. Give Ella time, she said. She'll come to you. I thank her for her support, but after the conversation I feel even more frustrated. No one at work is talking about this. Not that day, not the next day, not a week later. I feel like I've lost 3 friends at once. They don't overtly push me away, but a wall has formed between us. We're all just pretending that nothing happened. But I know they keep discussing it, just without me. A few weeks later, I finally write to Ella apologizing for overreacting. "I'm not mad," she replies. "And Sam really isn't engaged. He just lied to you because he was confused." Colleague number 1 showed her pictures of Sam with his fiancée. How could she explain that to herself? "I hope you don't treat him badly," Ella adds. I reply that I respect him professionally, but if he's either a cheater or a liar, then as a human being he doesn't deserve my respect. There was no response. That was the end of it. Later, I found the wedding registry again, hoping to warn his fiancée. Friends had advised me to do so, but Sam deleted the photos and shut down access. I still couldn't find her social media page. In the end, I just let it go. Now, a month later, Sam and I don't even look each other in the eye. There's a wall of silence between us. My co-workers act like nothing's happened either. We work together, but conversations are now superficial, strained. There's a tension in the air that no one dares to diffuse, and yet it's not their silence that gnaws at me the most, it's the sense of loss. I have lost not only trust in them, but also in the very idea of friendship in the team. After this story, I just can't look at them the same way I used to. I don't regret what I did, but now I know the price of that truth. The story is really heavy, and it touches on many themes: toxic relationships in the family, emotional abuse, and the search for independence and personal boundaries. The main character went through a huge number of trials, but in the end, she was able to find inner freedom. What do you think? Is it possible to build a normal relationship with such parents? Or at some point the only way out is to completely break the bond? Write in the comments, how would you act in her place?